What's up, psychedelic investors? My name's James, and I'd like to welcome you to the first ever episode of the Psychedelic Investor. Now, before we get into the meat and bones of what this video is about, I'd first like to take a moment to talk about who we are and why we're making these videos. So about a year ago, my investing partners and I were reading some scientific literature, as one does, and we stumbled across what appears to be a fantastic investing opportunity. And I am, of course, talking about investing in companies that use psychedelic compounds like psilocybin and MDMA to cure mental maladies like depression, anxiety, addiction, ADHD, and PTSD. Now, as we were doing our research, we came across an obvious problem. There was no one unified source of information where we could go to get all the info that we needed. We had to go to a university website here, we had to go to a company website there, and bring it all together. Now, after doing a year of our own research and, of course, investing in these companies ourselves, we decided to make this YouTube channel, the Psychedelic Investor, to bring all this information together in one unified source for you, the retail investor, so that you can make the best informed decision that you can with all the available information. So in this video, we're going to do three things. First, we're going to do a deep dive into the scientific literature. Fun. Second, we're going to analyze the two main companies that you can invest in right now in this field. And finally, we're going to take a step back and analyze the wider landscape and the potential time horizons that all investors should expect. Alright guys, so for the scientific literature part of this video, we're going to hop over to our website, thepsychedelicinvestor.com, where we have all of this information. So we're going to start with addiction. Now, as you can see here, about 38% of Americans are battling addiction each and every year to alcohol, heroin, cocaine, prescription drugs, etc., which costs about $740 billion annually to the American economy. So, in terms of psychedelics and helping with addiction, the first major study was done by Johns Hopkins University in 2014. So, this found that 80% of smokers were fully abstinent 6 months after taking the treatment, which is much more effective than any sort of traditional treatment. So like it says here in the article, it goes much farther than this though. In 2017, the American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse published research from two studies which researched the effect of ibogaine on opioid dependence. So just quickly, ibogaine is a drug which is found in West Africa, which is extremely hallucinogenic, but has also been known to help a lot with addiction. So this study found that 50% of people remained abstinent after 1 month, so they didn't take any drugs after 1 month. And a second study in New Zealand found that a single ibogaine treatment both reduced the withdrawal symptoms and achieved either complete cessation or sustained reduction in opioid use over a 12-month period. And again, there's been lots of other studies on this, 8 studies specifically that we looked at, and they found that a single dose or a few treatments with ibogaine may significantly reduce drug withdrawal, craving, and self-administration in dependent individuals lasting from 24 hours to weeks to months. So, on the topic of addiction, these results are really quite amazing, and it just goes to show that there is a huge market here for psychedelic medicines to address. Alrighty, so moving on to depression here. And for me personally, this is one of the most exciting areas that I think that psychedelic medicines can help with, because I know too many people that have clinical depression, and it really hurts their quality of life. So what the research shows is that at any time, about 8% of the American population has depression, and it's notoriously hard to treat. And current medications for it, be Xanax or whatever, they have nasty side effects, and they're not that effective. So enter the Beckley Foundation here, who found that after just one therapist-guided psilocybin session, 67% of participants' chronic depression was in remission 1 week after the sessions, and 42% were still in remission 3 months later. So guys, this is extremely fantastic. If you've ever had to take some medication for depression, or if you know somebody, love somebody that's had to do this, you know that these pills, they really change who the person is, and they can have lots of nasty side effects. So the fact that there might be an alternative to this in the form of psilocybin is very exciting. Now, just very quickly, in case not everybody knows what psilocybin is the active ingredient in compounds like magic mushrooms and LSD. So that's the chemical formula that causes these hallucinations. So the FDA has labeled psilocybin therapy as a breakthrough therapy for treating depression. And this suggests that the drug is an enormous improvement over other available options. So just one more study on depression and psilocybin. In 2016, the Journal of Psychopharmacology found that 80% of the terminally ill patients who had similar psilocybin sessions experienced significant reductions in depression and anxiety. Alrighty, here we're going to move on to PTSD. And like with depression, the potential for psychedelics to help patients with PTSD is extremely exciting. So more than 3 million people are diagnosed each year in the US with PTSD, and there currently is just no effective treatment. So solving this issue would obviously be tremendous help for millions of people. So let's dive into the data here. So the first study we're going to look at was looking at MDMA, specifically the effects of using MDMA to help women suffering from PTSD due to sexual trauma. And the results of this are quite amazing. It found that 83% of participants no longer had symptoms after 3.8 years. I really am kind of at a loss for words here. That's just absolutely fantastic. Something interesting that is worth highlighting is that the more time that passed after the treatment, the better the patients got. So just take a second to think about that. MDMA in women suffering from PTSD due to sexual trauma has helped 83% of the people that were in this trial, and the longer the time, or the more time that passed after the treatment, the better the patients got. So that's, again, just fantastic. Another study which looked at veterans with PTSD and police officers and firefighters taking MDMA found that after 3 doses, nearly all the participants saw some form of improvement in their symptoms, and about 2/3 simply did not have PTSD anymore. So think about all the vets that are coming back from our wars and all the people that have some sort of trauma in their life and the potential that this MDMA treatment can have to treat these people. Frankly, guys, when you look at the data and the stats here, it really makes it clear that we are on the precipice of a revolution in the pharmacology industry. Psychedelic medicines are really set to take off. So yeah, we're going to move on to we're going to move on to ADHD here. So unlike the previous 3 illnesses discussed, there isn't yet much clinical research for the relationship between ADHD and psychedelics. However, there's enormous amounts of anecdotal evidence that suggests microdosing, so taking a very small amount, of psilocybin has helped many people struggle with these disorders. Microdosing psilocybin is also very popular in Silicon Valley. You see lots of tech billionaires and engineers that are microdosing psilocybin. So there's lots of other areas of research that's also being looked into by various companies, universities, etc. You'll see Johns Hopkins University a lot. They're really on the front lines. But yeah, they're being studied from everything from, or universities are studying the effects of psychedelics on everything from dementia to asthma to inflammatory bowel disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. And we're really going to have to wait to see this data come out. But it just goes to show how widespread the positive effects of psychedelic medicines may have. Awesome. So now that we've covered some of the science, I just want to take a moment to talk about how drugs become legal for use in the United States. And this is through the clinical trial system. So this is very important because in order to know which companies to invest in this field, you need to know how far along the clinical trial process they are. So how does this work? Well, in the United States, in order for a drug to make it to market, it needs to pass through 3 phases of clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and 3. In the first phase, the company is evaluating whether or not the compound they are studying is safe to use in humans. So generally, this will be with a small sample size being tested in like 8 to 10 people. The second phase, once they prove in the first phase that the drug is safe, the company is looking to see whether or not it is effective at treating whatever disorder they're trying to treat. So generally, they'll have about 80 to 100 people that they're testing the drug in, and usually in different dosage levels. Finally, phase 3, which is the same as phase 2, except with a much larger sample size. So generally, they'll have several thousand people that they're testing the drug in across different populations to see how effective it is. So why this is also important is because it takes years to finish this process. In order to go from preclinical trials to post-phase 3 trials, it will take years and years to complete. So I just want to emphasize, when you're doing your own research at home into these companies, look at where the companies are in the clinical trials. A company that is studying psilocybin and is in phase 1 is not the same as a company that is studying psilocybin and is in phase 3. The latter is years ahead of the former. So again, this is just extremely important to look at when evaluating which companies you want to put your money in. How far along are they in the clinical trials process? Alrighty, so if you've made it this far, congratulations, because we just got to the juicy part of the video. Which companies should you invest in and why? So in this video, we're going to cover two different companies, Compass Pathways and Mind Medicine. So the first company we're going to cover today is called Compass Pathways, ticker symbol CMPS. Now Compass is a company that's trying to cure depression using psilocybin. That's right, I said cure depression. Now they're doing this with their own synthetic compound of psilocybin, which they call COMP360, and they're doing this in conjunction with in-person therapy settings. So just to reiterate, they're combining psilocybin with therapy. So when looking at Compass Pathways, there are a few important things that all investors should look at. First is the current stage in clinical trials. Second is their financial backing and balance sheet. And finally is their psilocybin regime that they're working on. So the first thing to look at with Compass Pathways is where they currently stand in their clinical trials. So Compass is about to complete their phase 2b studies looking at the efficacy of treating depression with psilocybin. So when should we expect results for this trial? Unfortunately, not until 2021, and the end of 2021 at that. I know, it's a long way off for investors. But again, I would just like to highlight how important it is that the company is even in phase 2b trials at all. This is years ahead of most of the competition. So in these trials, they're also looking at potential dose levels to see which doses are better than others, and hopefully at the end of next year, we're going to see all this data. So the second thing to look at in Compass Pathways is its finances. Who's backing it, and how good is their balance sheet? So something I really want to drill home to all viewers is that this company is being backed by a guy named Peter Thiel. Now, you may know Peter Thiel from his exploits in the PayPal mafia with Elon Musk, or as a main shareholder of Facebook, or as a shareholder of the new company, Palantir. So I just really want to emphasize that the fact that Peter Thiel is investing in Compass is a really good sign for Compass Pathways. Peter Thiel does not have a history of investing in companies that do not change the world. No, all the companies that he's publicly involved in have been world-changing companies. So when you're looking at Compass Pathways, something to just keep in the back of your brain is that Peter Thiel is invested in this company. So regardless of anything else you know, that alone should make it worth looking into. So jumping over to their balance sheet, we can see that Compass currently has about $68 million on hand, and they're currently spending around $17 million a quarter. So doing the math there, that we can see that they're spending for this total year, assuming everything stays constant to where it is now, and that will change, so these are just rough back-of-the-napkin calculations. Doing the math, that they currently have enough money to fund 1 year full of operations. Now, because their market cap is so huge at $1.3 billion, when they need to refinance in about a year, or probably a little bit sooner, it will be no issue whatsoever getting that money. So, something I just want to highlight for people at home doing their own research, of course, Compass Pathways currently has no revenue. They're not selling anything yet. They are just doing the research, and they hope to commercialize this process in a few years when they're done with their clinical trials, and that's okay. It's okay that they're not making any money. This is a startup company, and what is important right now is their technology. And if their technology works, they will have no issue whatsoever getting the money they need to finance their studies. The last thing I want to talk about is Compass's psilocybin therapy regimen. So what is it exactly that the company is currently studying and hopes to commercialize? So this psilocybin therapy treatment, which is again to treat treatment-resistant depression, has 3 different phases. The first one is preparation. So in this phase, the patient and the therapist get to know each other, they build a trusting relationship, and the patient just kind of gets to understand what's about to happen in the next session. It's important that he is prepared going into it. The second phase is called the psilocybin session. So in the psilocybin session, that's when the meat and bones of this procedure take place. The patient, for about 6 to 8 hours, will be engaged with the therapist in therapy. However, he or she will currently be on psilocybin while this therapy session is happening. The final phase that they have is called integration. So once the effects of the psilocybin is worn off, perhaps the next day, the therapist and the patient will again talk to each other and try to integrate whatever they learned in this session into their real life. So any breakthroughs that they might have had while on psilocybin talking to the therapist, make sure that that is reiterated in their conversations so that the patient can really learn from his experience. So again, this is the current method that they're going with. It could change a little bit on the margins. I don't expect a wholesale change, but it could change a little bit before it reaches market. But this is essentially what Compass Pathway is working on. They're working on psilocybin-assisted therapy to treat depression. So in sum, I'm very bullish on Compass Pathways. They seem to be the furthest ahead in their clinical trials for treating depression, and they seem to have the financial backing necessary. The fact that Peter Thiel is also involved is a very good sign. But again, just a reminder to all potential investors. This is a long-term investment. They aren't going to start selling anything or start any treatments for a few years at the minimum. Now, having said that, if they do start treating depression, how big is the market? Well, the market for medicines to treat depression in the United States alone is currently around $15 billion a year, and it is projected to keep rising. Now, Compass currently has a market cap of around $1.3 billion. So you can see that if they are the first ones to have a real treatment for people with depression and really change lots of people's lives, early investors could stand to make a lot of money off of their early investment. I don't want to speculate, like, could they 5x it, could they 10x it, because we just really don't know and there are too many variables. But one thing is for sure, if their technology and their protocol turns out to work, early investors who invest in Compass now could make a lot of money. So we're going to move on to Mindmed now. And Mindmed is ticker symbol MMEDF on the American OTC market and MMED on the Canadian NEO market. So Mindmed is actually my favorite company in this space because whereas Compass Pathways currently only has one clinical trial underway, and again, super important, super exciting clinical trial, but Mindmed has 8 clinical trials underway, and they range from the first phase until the second phase. We're going to get into that in a moment, but first, let's take a look at the financials. So before getting into the specific numbers, it's worth noting that one of their main financial backers is a guy named Kevin O'Leary. Now, you might know Kevin O'Leary from either Shark Tank or Dragon's Den on TV, and he's kind of like a celebrity investor. Now, I don't really know whether or not he is an amazing investor himself, or if that's just a brand that he's built up for himself, but it's kind of a fun thing to look at to see that somebody with the celebrity status of Kevin O'Leary is investing in Mindmed. Now, getting to how much money they actually have. As of October, the company had about $40 million on the books, and they're currently spending about $9 million a quarter. So again, doing some back-of-the-napkin math, we can see that this company has more than enough money to sustain itself for a year. And same thing with Compass Pathways, they're not currently making any money, they're just spending it all on research and on salaries. So they will have to refinance again, and that's okay. So the last thing I want to mention on their financials is their market cap. So Mindmed currently has a market cap around $291 million, which is more than 4 times smaller than Compass Pathways, who, like I said, has a market cap around $1.3 billion. So what this means for potential investors is that the potential upside for investing in Mindmed is currently much greater, 4 times greater actually, than investing in Compass Pathways because the current market cap is so much smaller. So now we're going to move on to clinical trials. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but when investing in this sector, see, I got it. When investing in this sector, clinical trials are the most important thing to look at. So, like I was saying, Mindmed currently has 8 clinical trials in motion right now. Now, 5 of them, are currently in the first phase. So they're currently studying some LSD, MDMA, DMT, and psilocybin, just to see the safety of humans taking this. And those are all in the first phase. So they're not necessarily looking to see if they can use DMT to cure depression or whatever. They're more just evaluating the safety of these compounds in humans. And side note, I am very excited to see how their DMT studies go for anybody that knows something about the subject. If not, I would definitely suggest watching The Spirit Molecule on Netflix. Anyhow, getting back on track here. The company currently has 3 clinical trials which are in phase 2. So these are phase 2A, not 2B, so all 3 are a little bit behind the time frame of Compass Pathways, but nevertheless, the fact that they're in phase 2 trials is very important. So what are these 3 phase 2 trials? Well, the first two have to do with LSD. So the first one they're looking at is whether or not they can use LSD to treat suicide headaches. Now, anybody that's ever had a suicide headache before knows how terrible it can be. It feels like somebody is ding, 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 putting an ice pick into your brain with each heartbeat another thrust being beaten down. And this is extremely unpleasant. There is no real great treatment for it, and millions of people suffer from it. By the way, that includes me. These suicide headaches are not pleasant. So like I was saying, they're in phase 2 trials of treating suicide headaches with LSD, and we're going to have to wait until the end of 2021 to see what the results are. But I am very hopeful that there will be positive results. The second LSD trial that they have, that's currently in phase 2, is to treat adult ADHD. So unlike in the first one, which was a full dose of LSD, this is microdosing. So maybe you've heard of the trend in Silicon Valley of engineers and other high-class people microdosing LSD to give productivity boosts. Well, there's no concrete evidence at the moment that this works yet, but Mindmed is currently studying microdosing LSD, specifically for people with ADHD and getting over that. But this will be the first kind of real evidence that we have to show that microdosing works. So again, very excited. And also, lots of people suffer from ADHD as an adult, and it can be very difficult. So of course, anything that we can do to help those people be better versions of themselves is a huge plus for the planet. The final second phase trial that they're doing, which is the one that I am most excited about, and that turned me on to this company in the first place, is with a drug called 18-MC, which is going to help treat opioid dependency. So what is 18-MC? 18-MC is a derivative of a drug called ibogaine that the company created, and this is their own proprietary drug. It's their intellectual property. And what's so special about 18-MC, which comes from ibogaine, is that unlike ibogaine, there is no hallucination. So ibogaine, when you take it, is extremely hallucinogenic. You're going to be tripping for like 8 hours. However, it has been said, and there's been anecdotal evidence that show that it helps people get over addiction. So what Mindmed has gone and done is create a drug based on ibogaine that does not have the same hallucinogenic effects, but they claim still has the healing benefits. Now, I am very excited for this again, and if this turns out to be true, they could change the lives of millions of people that have opioid dependency. And there is no real great cure for that at the moment. Like we talked about earlier in the scientific literature, rehab just doesn't really work. So, again, we're not going to see results for this for at least a year, perhaps longer. We're only in phase 2 trials. There's still phase 3 trials. But the fact that Mindmed seems to have such a well-rounded pipeline of products coming out bodes very well for the future, and it's the reason that Mindmed is my favorite company in this space. So just to summarize, I'm very excited by Mind Medicine. Not only do they've got a good financial backing, but they also have a very exciting pipeline of potential products coming down. So along with Compass Pathways, they're miles ahead of any of the competition in terms of where they stand in their clinical trials. And these two companies really seem to be the only companies at the moment that are worthy of any serious investment. For myself personally, and for my investing partners, Mindmed is our biggest stake in our psychedelic medicines portfolio. And yeah, we're very hopeful that we're going to see great things from it in the future. Alrighty guys, so now that we've covered Compass and Mindmed, I'd just like to take a step back and look at the wider landscape in this field. So, Compass and Mindmed aren't the only two companies that are currently doing research to treat mental maladies with psychedelics. In fact, there are lots of other companies that are aspiring to do this. Just a few examples are Champignon Brands, which is ticker symbol SHRM, Revive Therapeutics, ticker symbol RVV, and Field Trip, ticker symbol FTRP. Now, what all these other companies have in common is they aren't very far advanced in their clinical trials. In fact, they're all either preclinical or first phase clinical trials. And of course, we will cover some or all of these companies in future videos. We just kind of wanted to weed out the pack and pick the top 2 for this video. So while I got you here, I'd also just like to say that I am not a financial advisor. Please, 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 everybody that watches this video, do your own due diligence. Go and do your own research on these companies. Don't buy a stock just because some random guy on YouTube told you to. It doesn't matter if you're watching this channel or another channel. Always do your due diligence. Nobody on YouTube, or very few people on YouTube, are registered as financial advisors. Alrighty guys, now it's the part of the video where I throw it over to you. What do you guys think of Compass Pathways and Mindmed? Do you think that the pharmaceutical industry is set to be disrupted by psychedelic medicines? Let us know in the comments. And while you're at it, if you enjoyed this video, why not leave us a like and subscribe to the channel? It will really help with the YouTube algorithm. Signing out, this is James from the Psychedelic Investor. See you next time.